I'd like to now introduce Rob White, who will introduce our Distinguished Service Award winner.
Friends, Will Howie is a friend to so many. He is a mentor to so many. And I have been blessed to call him a colleague. Will Howie had a conversion experience in the 11th grade that led to his calling as a pastor. That calling might have been a surprise to some who knew him back then in the 1960s. It might have even been a bigger surprise for Will himself. 2.5 years at Belhaven College, the Vietnam War and the civil rights battles going on in the 1960s unveiled what he saw as a massive hypocrisy and ugliness in the institutional church that nauseated him and started the questions rolling. After being drafted in the Army in 1970, his eyes were open even more, and he made the official move to become an atheist. But as Will points out, God has a great sense of humor. 10 years later, he met his now wife, Michelle, and went with her to First Presbyterian Church in Oxford, Mississippi. One thing led to another, and he became involved with the mission work of the church, and then he was elected as an elder. At that time, he was working as a counselor, and it became fairly obvious to him that there was a spiritual component that was missing in a normal, quote unquote, counseling session. One day, Michelle asked him, "Why don't you just go to seminary?" Well, fast forward to his 40th birthday, which happened to occur while he was in the summer session of Greek school. And one day in 1989, Will was sitting in a classroom in our beloved Campbell Hall, waiting for his next class to begin, and reading an article in Presbyterians Today magazine about the water crisis in the world, when he had an epiphany. In Will's words, "My eyes were open to the huge and growing crisis of contaminated water in the world." Out of this odd, blessed moment, it was just a name given: Living Waters for the World. Nothing else. After graduation, Will served as a pastor in a small church in Mississippi. In his spare time, he consulted with engineers at the University of Mississippi, hotty toddy, and began tinkering with a water purification system that could be easily installed in areas of the world that didn't have access to clean water. Slowly, the idea of bringing living waters to the world was taking shape. In 1993, the appropriately named Synod of Living Waters adopted Living Waters for the World as a mission of the Synod. In 1996, Will and a team of volunteers installed the first water purification system in Empalme, Mexico. For the first 10 years, the team was able to install an average of 1.5 water systems a year. But as Will says, what good was that doing given the seriousness of the water crisis facing the world? It's at that point that the team decided to train and equip others to help. They began Clean Water University, of whom many of you are graduates, where volunteers are trained in how to install the systems and educate the local community and how to keep up the system. From that point, the whole status and work of Living Waters for the World changed. With more volunteers, installations mushroomed. Will and his team eventually had to create more networks to be able to manage relationships between initiating partners in the US and the operating partners across the globe. To date, almost 2,500 volunteers have been trained at Clean Water U. I'll repeat that. Almost 2,500 volunteers have been trained, and over 10,000 volunteers have joined teams to install 1,062 and counting systems in communities without access to clean water, always working with local operating partners, not for them. Will says, if you don't believe miracles exist, believe it now, because this is not our doing, but our partners, our water family throughout the world. Believe it because Jesus Christ is living waters for our lives and our souls. Longtime volunteer Joni Lukin says, Will is gregarious. He is undaunted by a challenge. He is David if Goliath is the water crisis. Anybody with any sense would know you can't solve that problem. But Will has the naivete of faith to believe we can do what God has called us to do. Will Howie, my friend, for your call to ministry, for your call to serve God's people, especially the least of these, for your love of the church, for your friendship, for your commitment in the face of challenges, for your insistence that we can do more when we do it together, and for your love of Mother Earth and all her inhabitants. We give thanks to God. On behalf of the Alumni Council of Columbia Theological Seminary, it is my pleasure to name you as Columbia Seminary's 2022 Distinguished Service Award winner. May God continue to bless you and guide both your life and the lives of all who are now drinking clean water because of your efforts. And in the words you used to end your church services with in the 90s, in place of amen, let us all say together, right on, right on. God bless you, Will.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Congratulations, Will. I'd like to invite you to speak and share a little bit with us. And thank you for your, amazing ministry. We are so grateful.
Well, thank you. And what a surprise, Rob. Thank you for that. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, the Alumni Council and Association. I am humbled, honored, and deeply touched to be receiving this award from my beloved seminary. Thank you indeed. One of the many blessings received during my years at Columbia, and there were many, came when Rob has already sort of given the story away. I was taking a break between classes, found an empty classroom in Campbell Hall, and slipped away to read, to pray, to think. It was in that day an intense, very strange, wonderful moment when the name Living Waters for the World was given. Nothing else, just the name. What has grown out of that ministry in the last 33 years continues to astound and amaze me. As Rob gave you the statistics, over 1,000 systems in 26 countries. Countless volunteers have stepped forward. Truly, the Lord is great. However, it would be a huge mistake for someone to think that it was me who has done this. No, not I, but Christ's Spirit working through me, within me, and through a whole host of water saints who I see some have joined in for this time. Thank you, gang. I call them wildcats. Working together with those amazing, talented, brilliant people from many congregations, from many denominations who have come in and jumped into the deep end of the pool, into the waters with us. I am also fully convinced that Living Waters for the World could not have come into being in any other denomination. It took an interconnected, deeply relational body like we in the Presbyterian Church USA to pull it off. Three primary things have animated our work from the very beginning. The first, Jesus Christ is living water for our bodies and our souls. You can't separate mind and body and spirit. It is both that we have to deal with. Second, flexibility and creativity are essential. So many times in the fields we got going, and if we weren't being able to roll with what was happening, things would not have gotten done. And then our third word, based from our own Reformed, always reforming, for Living Waters for the World, we're revising, always revising as we continually seek to learn, to grow from what has happened. And as our many partners have gone out into the world and the feedback comes, we are still growing into what God is calling us to be. But here in 2022, as followers of the Risen One, we live in between the times, between his first and his second coming. And in the midst of the manifold problems all around, far, far too many children are still dying because of contaminated water. And that is a dirty, rotten, crying shame. So today, thank you, my Columbia family, my Living Waters for the World family, for this high honor. To God the glory, and let good news and clean water keep on flowing. May it be so. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. I'm perfectly happy to give God the glory, but I also want to just make sure we're all celebrating the fact that you did have to answer that call. So thank you for your participation in the whole thing that God was doing there, because you made a lot of other things happen. And for that, we are grateful. So
thank you. And I am too. God is great.
Amen. All the time.